African country has embarked on this path to sustainable development, and we can only characterize that with four main factors. That is, number one, economic development, without which many African countries, even those that have made advances in democracy, would fail because they would not be able to produce jobs and services for their population. The next one is, of course, environmental sustainability. We have seen what that has done to many countries, ravaged them. The third one, of course, is population management. Some countries have relative advantage over others. And then finally, finally, social equity, so that a democratic Republic of Congo endowed with resources without that social equity cannot be stable. Now, I'm just taking one of those, which is energy, which is the engine of economic development, and then talking about circumstances in Africa, some of which are unique relative to other parts of the world, and some of the things that can be done within circumstances to try to address them. And then finally, we'll talk about some of that capacity building issue that some folks have raised already. As I said, there are many of these global and regional development initiatives, all of which are underlain by the need to develop energy resources. Where will the energy come from? When you talk of increasing income in countries, meaning increase in production, industrial production, where is energy? International trade agreements. So energy plays a significant role in the cost of production. So that determines to some extent how some countries can posture with their products in the international market. The Green Development Agreements, and a number of them, I will not go through them individually. But Africa has been on the upswing. It is not that it is yet uhuru, as Kenyans would say, but then if you look at the African constant GDP growth over the past few decades, you'll see that there's been a marked improvement. So we have to sustain that by moving things on the energy arena. Now, world and African value-added manufacturing. There has been talk about the need for Africa to leapfrog to other areas of human endeavor. But historically, most of the countries that are doing well now, be the European countries, Germany, be it Japan, the United States, they all started with manufacturing. So that is the industrial base of any country. Then diversification can then happen to other areas, like making agriculture come with an economy of scale and other area sectors like that. Now, energy system parameters in Africa. We have a very high total population increase rate. We have the highest in the world. Relatively low energy use per capita. It does not mean that these energy challenges in Africa are those of high energy use per capita. It's actually very low. It is energy inefficiency that is causing most of the energy problems here. Let's take a look at the global map. That's the global energy intensity map in 2009. Not much has changed. But what this reveals is that energy intensity is very high in African countries, that the energy you invest in producing $1 of goods. You see that in the United States, you see Japan, you see that in much of the rest of the world, it is pretty low, which is an advantage. But come to African countries where you have dark colors there, I see that it's very high. It means that there are many inefficiencies in the system that need to be addressed. Not much has changed on that map since. But take a look at energy consumption per capita. As I said, this is very low. Of course, this is a question of lifestyle and spatial location globally. In very cold countries, of course, we have to use a lot of energy for heating. Secondly, of course, the car ownership per family is higher in the US. So if you try to compute things like that on per capita basis, energy consumption is likely to be higher. In Europe as well, Australia, because it's a very large country, climate can be very harsh. So sometimes you need energy for cooling the environment and houses. Look at Africa, it is very low. But that does not mean that we don't have energy problems. Just that this is the global pattern. We do have that advantage that socioeconomic factors still relegate Africa to the lower rungs of the ladder when it comes to energy use. I took this picture some time ago. That's me there when I didn't have gray hair. But this mode of production, of course, is outdated. So even in the villages, China used to be like this, some expeditions there. But we have to not only talk about energy in very sexy terms at the high level, but at the village level as well. So there's got to be efficiencies. Manual labor to produce things does not add much to efficiency. It may have some level of social satisfaction in some sense, but on the whole, it is a detriment. It's detrimental. Now, there's some statistics. 25 out of 54 African countries are in energy crisis. This is established by the World Bank recently. Only 25% of South African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, have access to electricity, compared to 50% for South Asia and 80% for Latin America. So that plays a role in productivity, plays a role in pushing trade agreements, plays a role in so many other areas of social satisfaction. Now, 4.5% annual increase in GDP in Africa, but the generation capacity is very low. Now, if you have increase in population and increase in efforts to produce, and the generation capacity is low, we are not even talking about transmission, because in Africa they talk a lot about generation, not transmission and distribution. Those are equally important, because you can generate and you don't have the means to transmit to huge industrial centers or even distribute to population centers. So there's got to be a lot of investment. That map you see there is a map of electric power plants in Africa. You see them bunched in areas that are doing well, relatively. Take a look at that now. You see that that is Nigeria, Cameroon axis, DRC would, but trouble, political crisis, relegate them. Angola is doing well there. South Africa is doing well, although there are challenges because of the source of the electricity. It's coal. And we're going to talk a little about that in a short while. I talked about inefficiencies in the system. Although this data is not so recent, but the pattern has continued. You see losses. South Africa has done well with respect to efficiency. So you can produce a whole lot and lose a whole lot. It still doesn't help this situation. See Uganda, the highest losses after production, 40%. Imagine that sort of wastage. And look at other African countries, Sudan, Angola, Ethiopia, and so forth. But South Africa has done relatively well in that area, Botswana as well, and Lesotho. And proven oil, gas, and coal reserves in Africa. Energy can be divided into these three when it comes to the resources before you don't add electricity on the other end. So oil, we know that almost every African country that has a coastline is now oil producing, either oil producing or gas producing. They found reserves that are very large, and that will bring some problems, as I will show in a very short while. Now, look at South Africa, the coal reserves. South Africa has more than 90% of Africa's coal reserves. So there's quite a lot to do there, because countries like to use coal wherever coal is available in abundance and cheap to exploit. This is the reason that it was very difficult for some countries, including my own, the United States, to sign Kyoto Protocol, because we would have had to pass that cost to the power plants and eventually to the consumers. And nobody during an election year would like to take such a political risk. So this is still the case. South Africa will have to find use for the coal, maybe power plants that burn coal more efficiently and release much less pollutant. But to talk about wholesale abandonment of coal, that is not going to happen. There is no historical precedent to that. Now, look at oil. Of course, Algeria and all these other countries, and I'll get into where the problems are. But for our own circumstance in Africa, we always have to make energy choices this way. We should make energy choices this way. To look at energy accessibility, energy acceptability, and energy availability. People may like solar power so much, but they may be in a corner of the continent where the insulation is poor. So that is not an option there. So these three factors must combine in these three rings intersecting circles that define which of the energy technologies should be implemented, be there solar, be there coal, be there so forth. So availability of coal in South Africa is very high. You see, so that's a supporting factor. What about acceptability? That may be poor because of the emission of greenhouse gases. And then accessibility, probably not so bad. But then because it suffers from acceptability, then it is problematic. We can take basically any of the available options and scale them with these three factors to see country by country or region by region which one is feasible. Now, to look at some factors associated with land use. Land use is a problem in Africa. I could spend a lecture on that. Number one, most of the African cities evolved. They were not planned. If you look at a typical map of a European town, you will see that houses and structures are laid out in rectilinear patterns. It's very easy to provide energy, distribution system, and other utilities when you have that rectilinear system. But that is not the case in Africa. So land use and how much land you have available is very important. Photovoltaics, some people have complained, even in the Sahel, that the few areas they have for agriculture are taken up by these wind farms. I was just talking with my friend Kennedy about California, where these wind farms have now replaced trees, for example. So photovoltaic, that is the much land they need to develop them to scales that they can be meaningful. The question is, are this level of land available in some of the areas, especially the very small countries? Now, this is an area that Africa lags behind very significantly. So I want to take a little time to explain. You see, all civil industrial activities, be they the implementation of energy technologies, will generate waste. They say contaminants, so that we don't say just waste, so it seems this is just one class of these contaminants. When they generate waste, of course, many release processes release these contaminants into the environment. Some may have direct ecological impacts. There are no further transfers. Ecological impacts from burning coal in power plants, they just rain down, acid rain and so forth, as in West Africa and Central Africa. Now, others, they may need to go further. You have to have exposure pathways, and there are many, many mathematical, as you all know, most of you, mathematical expressions for going from here to here and for going from here to here. The human system, which is a problem because of vulnerabilities in Africa. We said some things about nutrition and health, but obviously quality of life issues, diet, exercise, a whole lot of other things. But the fact is that you will enter into the human system. Some are toxic, some are not too toxic, but some will generate health impacts ranging from just nausea to death by cancer. And there are many mathematical expressions for that. The question is this: what fraction of these would be classified as energy issues that induce negative impacts that percolate the system? And that fraction is extremely high in Africa. Let's take a look at some of those. Look at that. Okay? In much of West Africa, when they have oil fields in Nigeria, they have oil fields in that small country in the ocean, Equatorial Guinea, now South Tome, and many others that will soon come. But you see, they flare gas. For example, Nigeria is the second largest flare of gas in the world. I went to the oil fields in Siberia some time ago, but the circumstance there even trails that of Nigeria. Before they were the worst, Nigeria was second, but now Nigeria has taken over. So they have no system for collecting this gas that is released with the with oil exploitation. So that obviously goes up, and because environmental contamination knows no national frontiers. So Republic of Benin, Congo, all the way down to South Africa will have the same issues. It may decrease with distance, but nonetheless, it is still there. So acid rain does come down. We've measured very high acidity in rain all across West Africa, my team from the University of North Carolina. But in any case, that's what happens. And you see that that acid rain rains directly on food crops. Nobody washes vegetables before they take them to the marketplace. That kind of thing. And even if they were to wash, it would have no impact whatsoever. As most of those contaminants are not soluble in water. So this is a big problem. And where does it come from? It comes from the harvesting of Africa's energy resources, which are now in Nigeria, Angola, and many other countries now coming up in this energy sector. Now, carbon dioxide emissions. I just told you that one of the problems is the emissions from these energy facilities. Africa total has at that time, 1900 to 2004, 2.5. South Africa is the greatest emitter of greenhouse gases in Africa by a whole lot. As a matter of fact, you can combine all the others right now, and they still wouldn't make up the South African one. Because South Africa is essentially an industrial country. It's done very much, while most of the other countries are still natural resource harvesting countries, where much of the production is done elsewhere in Europe. But South Africa has made great strides in industrial production, so this is to be expected, as we would expect from a Japan or a South Korea or any of these Asian tigers. Now, this is what I just explained to you. I wanted to illustrate, and bring this up to illustrate to you all. So you see that much of the coastline of Africa now has reserves of oil. It's a matter of time that these companies are waiting to the stage in which it becomes economical to try to exploit them. So this is what you would typically have, the coastline, and out there is an oil platform. So they try to get oil from this reservoir, and obviously you know that oil is actually 95% salt water, brine. The oil is about 5%. So, but most importantly, this oil comes with gas. So when they flare this gas, meaning they don't use it at all, they don't have technologies for taking this gas. Nigeria's parliament, I went to speak there, and have been planning for the past 20 years to do something about that. They still haven't done it. But the thing is that this gas will go upstairs, go up into the atmosphere as allowed by the buoyancy. It cannot go up forever. At some point, the atmospheric circulation pattern, and I see climate scientists sitting there, my colleagues, the atmospheric circulation pattern will take it up, and then they begin to come this way. They'll mix with water. Obviously, in basic chemistry, if sulfur dioxide mixes with water, it becomes sulfuric acid. If nitric acid mixes with water, it becomes nitric acid. So the thing is that that thing there will come back out, mix with rain, and fall on houses. So if you are flying, I was flying over Equatorial Guinea on my way back to Holland. Most of the houses are very dark roofs. That's corrosion by this acid rain. And it's a big problem, ecological problem. It's not just a location-specific environmental problem, but at ecological scale. Another one, that I grew up to show you. And this is the coast of Africa. This is where you have a whole lot of oil. Ghana now is oil producing. Liberia will be, and many of them are drilling at small scales now. So along the coast of West Africa, there's a lot of oil spillages. Not just that it is drilling alone. You know, those tankers, they get to leak a whole lot of oil. But we don't have the capacity in Africa yet. They've been talking about marine coastal security, but they've not gone to that extent. There's a whole lot needed to do that. Number one, the grid for monitoring has to be shortened to pick up that oil. And NASA in the US has been trying to work with some of us to deal with that. But that is complicated technically. We are not there yet. But the fact is that these countries are suffering because this oil will impact upon fishing. And a lot of the people who inhabit these coastal areas, and about 80% of the African population is within 100 miles of the coast. So a lot of them have their subsistence from fishing. So you imagine the destruction of the earth, and the impacts of climate change has come to compound that. This is a typical oil spill. Sometimes it spills over lots and very large areas. I took this picture not so long ago.